Hello, my friend. Tonight we stand outside a monastery gate in the last hour before dawn, while the world beyond the walls is still black with rain. The road is mud. The trees lean under the weight of water, somewhere far below the hill. A horse stumbles on loose stones, and its rider curses beneath his breath. The sound carries upward through the darkness, thin and broken, until it reaches the outer wall of the abbey, where no lamp is supposed to burn and no voice is supposed to rise. But tonight, a lamp is burning. It flickers behind a narrow window, deep inside the cloister, where a young novice stands barefoot on cold flagstones with his robe pulled tight around him. He's not meant to be awake. He's not meant to be watching, and yet he cannot look away, because in the passage below, 3 monks are moving quickly through the shadows, and one of them carries something wrapped in dark cloth. The novice knows the sound of the monastery at night. He knows the slow breathing of sleeping brothers, the creak of beams in the roof, the drip of rain from the gutters, the small scratch of mice near the grain store. He knows the bell that wakes them for prayer when the sky is still without colour. He knows silence so well that any change inside it becomes enormous. This is not ordinary silence. This is the silence of men afraid to speak. The 3 monks pass beneath the window, their sandals whisper on stone. The oldest of them, Brother Matthew, pauses at the corner and listens. His face is narrow and pale in the lamplight. The novice has seen that face bent over parchment in the writing room, patient and still for hours at a time. He has seen those hands mix ink, sharpen quills, and turn fragile pages with the care of a man touching bones. Now those same hands tremble. Beyond the monastery walls, another sound rises, iron against iron, a bridle chain, a sword striking a stirrup. Then comes the low murmur of several men speaking at once. The riders are closer now. The abbey itself seems to hold its breath. Its church, dormitory, kitchen, barns, chapter house, library, infirmary, and cloister all lie enclosed within the wall like organs inside a sleeping body. For generations, travellers have seen this place from the valley and believed it to be a house of peace, a lantern of prayer, a refuge from hunger, violence, and the long uncertainties of the medieval road. But every refuge has doors, every door has keys, and every key suggests that something must be kept out or kept within. At the end of the passage, the monks reach a small chamber near the library. It is a room the novice has only entered once, and even then, with his eyes lowered, it smells of wax, dust, old leather, and dry wood. In daylight it appears harmless, almost humble, with shelves along the wall and a chest bound in iron. But tonight, with rain pressing against the shutters and armed riders climbing the hill, it feels like the centre of the world. Brother Matthew kneels before the chest. Another monk lifts the lamp. The third looks back toward the cloister, and for a brief moment his eyes rise to the window. The novice steps away. His heart beats hard under his ribs. He tells himself that he has seen nothing. He tells himself that obedience begins where curiosity ends. That is what he has been taught. The monastery is built on obedience, measured by bells, ruled by prayer, held together by habits repeated until they become stronger than desire. Still he listens. A key turns. The chest opens with a soft iron groan. The wrapped object is placed inside. For one heartbeat before the cloth falls away, the novice sees a flash of colour. Not gold, though gold would not have surprised him. Not a jewelled cup, not a saint's bone, not a royal seal. It is something flatter, darker, and older. A book, perhaps, but unlike the Psalters and Gospels he has seen during worship, its cover is cracked. Its edges are blackened. A strip of faded red leather crosses its face like a wound. Then the lid closes. The key turns again, and the secret disappears. A bell should not ring at this hour, but one does. It strikes once from the gatehouse, a harsh sound, a warning. The novice freezes in the dark corridor above. The monks below extinguish the lamp. The entire abbey falls into shadow. Rain beats against the roof. The horses arrive at the gate. A fist pounds on wood. In the church, where the great altar waits beneath painted saints and hanging lamps, the abbot rises from prayer. He is an old man, heavy with years, but his eyes are clear. He has governed this house through failed harvests, noble disputes, winter hunger, and rumours from distant courts. He knows that a monastery is never entirely outside the world. Kings send letters, bishops send demands, families send sons, dying men send guilt wrapped in gifts of land. And sometimes men with swords arrive before dawn. The gate opens, boots cross the threshold. The riders enter dripping with rain, their cloaks dark, their faces hard from travel. They smell of wet wool, leather, horse sweat, and cold iron. Their leader carries a sealed order. He bows only slightly to the abbot, not enough for reverence, enough for law. They have come to search the library. No one gasps. No one protests. The monks lower their eyes. Their discipline is perfect, and that perfection is more unsettling than fear. The abbot receives the command in silence. He gestures toward the cloister walk. The riders follow. They pass the kitchen where yesterday's bread cools under cloth. They pass the infirmary where an old brother sleeps beside a bowl of herbs. They pass the refectory where wooden cups stand in rows, waiting for morning. They pass painted walls showing paradise, judgment, angels, and flames. At last they enter the library. Here, the air changes. Even the armed men slow down. The room is small by the measure of castles, but vast by the measure of memory. Along its shelves rest sermons, legal texts, saints' lives, medical recipes, letters, chronicles, land grants, copied poems, fragments of ancient authors, and books whose makers died centuries ago. Each volume has passed through hands that feared damp, fire, theft, worms, ignorance, and war. Each page is a survival. The riders begin their search. Chests open. Shelves are inspected. A knife slides beneath loose boards. One man lifts a gospel book with careless fingers, and a monk flinches almost invisibly. Another examines a roll of charters tied with cord. The abbot watches without movement. The novice has crept to the stair near the passage. He should be in the dormitory when he should be asleep among the others. Instead, he sees candlelight trembling across faces, and he begins to understand that silence is not emptiness. Silence can be armour. Silence can be a wall. Silence can be a language spoken by those who have too much to lose. The search continues. Nothing is found. At last the leader of the riders turns toward the abbot. He studies him for a long moment, as if trying to read a hidden script beneath the old man's skin. The abbot meets his eyes. Outside, the rain begins to soften. Then the sealed order is folded away. The men leave before sunrise. Their horses descend the hill through mist, back toward the river road and the world of courts, quarrels, and commands. The gate shuts behind them. The bar falls into place inside the cloister. The monks begin to gather for the first office of the day, their faces calm, their voices low, their bodies returning to the rhythm that has shaped their lives. The bell rings again. This time it calls them to prayer. The novice stands among them in the dim church as chant rises into the rafters. Latin words move like smoke through the nave. Candles burn before the altar. Rainwater drips from the cloaks of the gatekeepers onto the stone floor. No one speaks of the riders. No one speaks of the chest. No one speaks of the book with the blackened edges. Yet the secret remains. It rests in darkness behind iron, surrounded by prayers, walls, fields, graves, and sleeping histories. Perhaps it is dangerous. Perhaps it is precious. Perhaps it is both. In the medieval monastery, such things were not always separate. A book could save a memory, challenge a king, preserve a forbidden idea, expose a forged inheritance, heal a fever, name a crime, or carry the voice of a vanished world into another age. Outside, morning comes slowly. The valley appears through pale mist. Smoke rises from peasant cottages. A shepherd leads his animals toward wet pasture. The abbey bell carries over fields, woods, and river bends, telling the countryside that order has returned. To those who hear it from afar, the sound means peace. But within the walls, beneath the surface of prayer, another truth waits. The monastery is not only a place of holiness. It is a vault. It is a workshop of memory. It is a court of discipline, a shelter for the sick, a landlord, a school, a prison of vows, a treasury of bones, a guardian of books, and sometimes a keeper of secrets that powerful men would rather see destroyed. And in the fading darkness, as the monks sing the first prayers of the day, the novice lowers his eyes and learns the first lesson of the cloister. The quietest places can hide the deepest storms. Across medieval Europe, the monasteries stood like islands of stone in a restless sea. Some rose above river valleys where mist gathered at dawn and cattle moved slowly through wet grass. Some clung to cliffs where gulls cried over black water. Some rested deep in forests, hidden among beech, oak, and pine, where the paths were narrow and wolves still crossed the snow in winter. Others stood near busy roads, close enough to hear wagon wheels, pilgrims, traders, beggars, soldiers, and royal messengers passing beyond the gate. To a traveller, one monastery might appear suddenly after days of hardship. A tower above the trees, a bell in the fog, a line of walls pale against the hills. There were no modern maps to make the world feel small, no clear borders marked on paper for ordinary people, no safe journey promised by distance. The medieval world was immense because it was slow. Every mile had to be walked, ridden, rowed, or dragged by animal strength. And yet these houses were connected. A monk in northern England might pray according to a rule also known in Italy. A manuscript copied in France might be carried to Germany. A relic from Rome might draw pilgrims to a village that had once been unknown. Wine could travel from a southern vineyard to a northern abbey cellar. Wool from monastic flocks could move through markets and ports. Beeswax, salt, iron tools, spices, parchment, medicine, and news all passed along routes that made the cloister less isolated than it seemed. The world of the monastery was enclosed, but not cut off. It breathed through roads. Imagine the old routes stretching outward in every direction, from the shores of Ireland, where monasteries faced Atlantic winds, boats crossed rough channels toward Britain and the continent. From the valleys of the Loire and the Seine, abbeys sat among vineyards, mills, and fields, shaped by the rhythms of water and harvest. In the German lands, monastic houses rose beside rivers that carried timber, grain, merchants, and imperial commands. In Italy, ancient roads still crossed landscapes haunted by the ruins of Rome. Farther south and east, other Christian communities lived under different pressures. Greek monasteries guarded icons and theological traditions in the Byzantine world. Syrian, Coptic, Armenian, and Georgian monks prayed in languages older than many kingdoms. In the eastern Mediterranean, desert monasteries stood in hard light, surrounded by rock, dust, and silence. Their walls were fewer, their landscapes harsher, but they belonged to the same vast hunger for order in an uncertain age. A single bell could not be heard across such distances, but a way of life could. The great rivers mattered: the Rhine, Rhone, Danube, Thames, Seine, Po, and Loire did more than waterfields. They carried authority. They moved goods, soldiers, bishops, books, and rumour. An abbey built near a river could become a storehouse, a ferry point, a place of hospitality, a legal witness, and a quiet power in the surrounding land. River mist might soften its walls at morning, but the documents kept inside could decide who owned a meadow, who owed rent, and who had the right to grind grain at a mill. Here the scale becomes difficult to see all at once. A monastery was not merely a church with sleeping rooms. Around many abbeys stretched an invisible map of dependence. There were farms in the distance, tenants in scattered hamlets, woodlands reserved for pigs and timber, fisheries on rivers, salt pans near the coast, orchards, vineyards, sheepfolds, mills, barns, and market rights. The monks might rarely leave the enclosure, yet their institution reached through the hands of lay brothers, stewards, reeves, labourers, servants, tenants, and hired workers. The cloister looked quiet. The estate was alive. In spring, ploughs opened dark soil under a pale sky. In summer, hay was cut and turned. In autumn, grain was brought into barns, apples pressed, grapes crushed, sheep counted, rents recorded. In winter, repairs were made, wood was hauled, accounts were checked, and candles were burned through the long offices of the night. The prayer of monks rose from within a much larger machine of land, labour, obligation, and survival. Not every monastery was wealthy. Many were poor, vulnerable, and cold. Some struggled to repair leaking roofs. Some had too few books, too little food, or too many debts. Some depended on local nobles whose protection could become control. Some houses for women lived under stricter limits, watched by bishops and families who praised devotion yet feared independence. In lonely places, a small community might survive on thin fields, rough bread, beans, fish, and whatever the seasons allowed. Still, even a poor monastery could hold symbolic weight. Its altar made the landscape sacred, its cemetery gathered the dead, its bell organised time beyond its walls, its feast days drew villagers, its scribes remembered names, its prayers offered a promise that ordinary labour, grief, birth, illness, and death belonged to a larger order. In an age when famine could follow a wet summer, and war could arrive with little warning, this promise mattered deeply. The walls themselves spoke. They were built from local stone, brick, timber, or whatever the land offered. In the north, thick walls resisted cold and damp. In mountain valleys, buildings huddled against wind. Near coasts, salt air weathered carved faces and iron hinges. In warmer regions, cloisters opened to light, gardens, and running water. Each monastery carried the mark of its landscape. Yet many shared familiar features: church, dormitory, refectory, chapter house, cloister walk, kitchen, guest house, infirmary, workshops, barns, and cemetery. A traveller who knew one abbey could partly read another. There was comfort in that pattern, but scale brought variety as well as order. Some monasteries were great and famous, with royal burials, jewelled shrines, schools and libraries. Others were small priories tucked into valleys, dependent on a mother house far away. Some were houses of monks, some of nuns, some of canons, some of military religious orders, some of hermits gathered around a chapel. They shared elements of prayer and discipline, but their lives could differ sharply in wealth, authority, education, and exposure to danger. Across this landscape, the monastery became a borderland between worlds. It stood between heaven and earth, but also between peasant and lord, village and court, memory and forgetting, wilderness and cultivation. Its guest house received strangers, its archive held claims, its infirmary treated bodies, its church received souls, its fields produced food, its library preserved words that might otherwise vanish. A man might come to its gate as a pilgrim, another as a debtor, another as a dying noble seeking burial, another as a child given to God by his family. The same gate open to many lives. That is what made the monastic world so powerful. It seemed withdrawn, yet it touched almost everything. A king might endow an abbey to secure prayers for his dynasty. A widow might give a field for the soul of her husband. A merchant might stop for shelter on the road. A peasant might resent the rents owed to holy landlords. A scholar might seek a book. A thief might seek sanctuary. A bishop might demand reform. A dying woman might ask to be remembered in the prayers of strangers. From the outside, monasteries appeared still. From within the wider medieval world, they were points of movement, exchange, control, memory, and hope. As the sun set over Europe's fields and rivers, bells sounded from one valley to another, not in perfect harmony, not as one choir, but as scattered voices rising from stone enclosures across a vast and uncertain continent. Each bell marked an hour. Each wall marked a boundary. Each community held its own fears, duties, treasures, and silences. And beyond every cloister, the road continued. Who were they? The question seems simple when spoken softly inside a stone church. But it opens like a door into many rooms. They were monks and nuns, abbots and abbesses, novices and lay brothers, scribes, singers, gardeners, healers, cooks, confessors, teachers, and keepers of the dead. Some had chosen the cloister freely. Some had been offered to it as children. Some came after war, illness, grief, disgrace, ambition, or a sudden terror of judgment. They were not all saints. They were human beings under vows. To imagine them only as pale figures drifting through candlelight is to miss the harder truth. Many knew hunger, many knew anger, many missed the voices of family. Some struggled against boredom so heavy it felt like a sickness of the soul. Some desired silence, then discovered that silence could make every hidden thought louder. Some entered with deep devotion. Others entered because a family estate could not support another heir, or because noble blood needed a respectable place to rest beyond marriage and inheritance. The monastery was a refuge, but it was also a test. It asked a person to surrender private ownership, sexual life, much of personal choice, and the ordinary freedom to come and go. It replaced the household with the community. It replaced the marketplace with measured labour. It replaced the changing seasons of worldly ambition with bells, psalms, fasting, obedience, correction, and repetition. Such a life could break pride. It could also conceal it under more delicate forms. So another question rises quietly. Where did they come from? They came from villages with thatched roofs and smoky interiors, from noble halls where dogs slept beneath tables, from market towns where wool, salt, fish, and iron changed hands, from castles, farmsteads, fishing settlements, and families whose names were never written down. A young boy might arrive holding his father's sleeve, confused by the smell of incense and wax. A widow might enter after burying 2 children and a husband. A scholar might come because books mattered more to him than marriage. A knight might come late in life, carrying memories no confession could fully erase. For some, the gate closed gently. For others, it closed like fate. Medieval society did not think of the individual in the way later centuries would. A person belonged to kin, lordship, village, parish, and God. Choices were shaped by birth, duty, land, gender, debt, and fear of the soul's future. In that world, the monastery offered a strange possibility. It could narrow life, yet enlarge meaning. It could remove a person from ordinary society, yet place that person at the imagined centre of the universe, praying for the living and the dead. The monks and nuns withdrew from the world. But why? The answer begins with longing. They longed for purity in a world of violence. They longed for order where harvests failed and kings died suddenly. They longed for forgiveness when sin was not an abstract idea, but a weight carried in the chest. They longed for heaven, not as a poetic image, but as the final country toward which every bell, fast, vigil, chant, and burial pointed. Yet longing alone does not build walls. Fear helped build them too. There was fear of temptation, fear of hell, fear of disorder, fear that memory would vanish, fear that sacred learning would be lost, fear that the body would master the soul, fear that wealth would corrupt, and fear that the world outside the cloister moved too quickly toward ruin. The monastery promised separation, a line of stone, a rule, a daily pattern strong enough to hold back chaos. And still, the world entered. It came through donations, lawsuits, gossip, sick travellers, royal messengers, storms, tax demands, epidemics, famine, and the anxious hopes of families who wanted their names remembered in prayer. It came through books from distant lands, relics wrapped in silk, coins struck with foreign rulers, and letters sealed in wax. The monastery did not escape the world. It filtered it, interpreted it, recorded it, and sometimes hid it. How did they rise? Not by armies, at least not usually. Their strength came from endurance. A castle could fall in a season. A dynasty could die with one heirless ruler. A market could burn. But a monastery, if protected by land, discipline, and memory, could last for centuries. It could receive gift from one generation, defend them with documents in the next, and transform scattered fields into lasting power. Prayer became influence. Memory became property. Writing became protection. In a world where many people relied on spoken promises, the monastery kept records. It preserved charters, copied privileges, remembered donors, listed rents, calculated harvests, and named obligations. This did not make it merely spiritual. It made it administrative. The quiet hand of the scribe could be as important as the sword arm of a noble. A line of ink might defend a meadow more effectively than a spear, if the right lord, bishop, or court accepted its authority. Here lies one of the cloister's most powerful secrets. The monks did not only preserve holy words, they preserved claims. A parchment could say who had given land, who had witnessed the gift, which boundary stones mattered, which mill belonged to which house, and which family had the right to burial near a sacred altar. Such documents could calm disputes. They could also create them. They could protect the weak. They could strengthen the powerful. A monastery's archive was not a dead room. It was a chamber of sleeping arguments. Why did their world change? Because nothing enclosed by human hands remains untouched forever. Wealth attracted attention. Discipline softened in some places and sharpened in others. Reformers accused old houses of comfort. Kings looked at monastic lands and saw resources. Bishops looked at independent abbots and saw rivals. Towns grew. Universities appeared. New religious movements walked into streets and marketplaces, preaching poverty outside the cloister. Wars shifted borders. Plague thinned communities. Printing changed the meaning of books. Ideas moved with a speed that no wall could entirely slow. But change was not always decline. Sometimes it was renewal. A neglected abbey could be revived by stricter rule. A house of women could become a centre of learning and aristocratic influence. A remote monastery could become famous through a relic, a visionary, a school, or a manuscript. Silence did not mean stagnation. Beneath the surface, monastic life was repeatedly reimagined, defended, criticized, and restored. What did they leave behind? Stone, certainly. Roofless churches with grass growing where choirs once stood, cloister arches open to rain, carved capitals worn by weather, fish ponds filled with reeds, boundaries still traced by hedges, villages shaped by estates long dissolved, place names carrying faint memories of abbots, saints, cells, priories, and holy wells. But they left more than ruins. They left books copied through winters when ink thickened in the cold. They left music shaped for voices rising before sunrise. They left farming methods, gardens, hospitals, schools, chronicles, legal habits, legends of saints, patterns of charity, and ideas about time itself. They left the notion that a life could be organised around hours of prayer, labour, reading, eating, sleeping, and contemplation, until the day became a ladder between earth and eternity. And they left mysteries. Some are hidden in archives, where old handwriting waits to be read. Some lie beneath floors, among bones arranged in faith and rank. Some live in corrections scraped from parchment, in margins where a tired scribe added a complaint, a joke, a prayer, or a drawing of a small animal. Some remain in sealed reliquaries, bricked-up rooms, vanished libraries, missing chronicles, forged charters, and stories that changed each time they were retold. The deeper one listens, the less simple the silence becomes. The medieval monastery was not one thing. It was sanctuary and prison, school and estate, memory palace and workplace, theatre of ritual and shelter from despair. It shaped the landscape, the calendar, the written word, and the imagination of Europe and beyond. It hid ambition beneath humility, power beneath prayer, and human longing beneath the discipline of stone. So the questions remain in the air like incense. Who were they? Where did they come from? How did they rise? Why did their world change? What did they leave behind? The answers are not locked in a single chest or written in one perfect book. They are scattered across walls, fields, chants, graves, recipes, ledgers, illuminated letters, broken seals, and the worn thresholds of old gates. To follow them is to enter a world where withdrawal became influence, where silence became language, and where the secrets of the cloister were often hidden in plain sight. To understand the hidden world of medieval monasteries, we must go back to places that looked nothing like the abbeys of later centuries. There were no high towers at first, no carved cloisters, no full granaries, no great libraries, no orderly estates stretching across valleys. The earliest impulse was simpler and more severe. A person walked away from the town, the family, the market, the warm room, the known path, and went toward emptiness. Not because emptiness was gentle, but because it stripped life down to its hardest truths. In the deserts of Egypt, Syria, and Palestine, men and women sought God in landscapes where survival itself became a form of prayer. The sun burned white on stone, sand entered the mouth and eyes, water had to be found, carried, guarded. Food could be no more than bread, dates, herbs, or whatever the body could endure. At night, cold came quickly, and the stars seemed close enough to judge the human soul. The desert was not silent in the way a peaceful garden is silent. It was alive with testing. Wind moved over rock. Jackals called in the distance. Insects crept through cracks. The mind, deprived of ordinary noise, began to produce its own. Memories returned. Regrets grew sharper. Hunger created visions. Loneliness made temptation feel like a voice. The seeker who fled the city discovered that the city had followed him inward, with its pride, desire, fear, anger, and longing for praise. Here, deep origins become more than geography. They become an interior landscape. The first holy loners were not escaping merely from other people. They were confronting themselves, They believed the world was beautiful but dangerous, made by God yet wounded by sin. The city offered trade, family, pleasure, wealth, conversation, argument, ambition, and distraction. The wilderness offered exposure. It removed excuses. It made the body small and the soul enormous. Some lived alone in caves. Some settled near tombs, abandoned forts, dry riverbeds, or ruined settlements. Some stood for long hours in prayer. Some wove baskets from reeds and traded them for food. Some accepted visitors who walked miles seeking advice, blessing, healing, or a single sentence worth remembering. The one who withdrew completely could become famous for withdrawal, and this was one of the earliest paradoxes of monastic life. Solitude attracted crowds. A hermit might leave society, only for society to follow. The landscape shaped the practice. In Egypt, the Nile Valley created a sharp border between fertility and barrenness. On one side were villages, fields, irrigation channels, tax collectors, boats, reeds, cattle, and mud brick houses. On the other side stretched desert, harsh and luminous. To step across that boundary was to move from human order into a space that seemed closer to demons, angels, death, and revelation. In Syria, devotion sometimes took even stranger forms. Ascetics sought exposed places, hills, pillars, and cells where the body was deliberately made uncomfortable. In Palestine, caves and holy sites gave solitude a geography filled with biblical memory. In Anatolia and Armenia, cliffs, highlands, and cold valleys shaped communities that had to endure snow as well as silence. Across these regions, climate was never background. It trained the body. It disciplined desire. It told people what kind of holiness seemed possible. But the wilderness alone could not create the medieval monastery. Something else was needed. A lonely seeker might inspire awe, but a community needed habits. It needed food storage, water, leadership, shared worship, ways to settle quarrels, and rules for sleep, fasting, work, and prayer. It needed to decide who could enter, who must leave, and what obedience meant when several flawed human beings tried to live as if heaven had already begun. So this cell became a cluster. The cluster became a community. The community became a school of discipline. In certain places, groups formed around a respected elder. They didn't always live under one roof. Some remained in separate huts or cells, gathering for prayer and instruction, then returning to solitude. Others began to live more closely together, sharing meals, labour, worship, and correction. The movement from lonely holiness to organised common life was slow, uneven, and full of tension. One path valued isolation, another valued obedience within community. Medieval monasticism inherited both. The cave and the dormitory would always remember each other. This memory mattered. Even when later monasteries owned mills and vineyards, even when abbots advised princes, the old dream of the desert remained hidden at the centre. The monk in a green European valley might never see Egyptian sand, yet he inherited stories of saints who battled hunger, pride, demons, and despair in lonely places. The physical desert became a spiritual measure. It asked every generation whether comfort had softened devotion. Landscape continued to guide the spread of the monastic idea. In Western Europe, the wilderness was not usually sand. It was forest, marsh, mountain, moor, island, and uncultivated land. A group seeking withdrawal might settle where fields were poor, roads uncertain, and human habitation scattered. Trees had to be cleared, stones removed, water channeled, soil tested, huts became chapels, chapels became churches, churches gathered graves. The wild place slowly changed. Prayer turned into settlement. Settlement turned into memory. This is one of the quiet transformations at the root of monastic history. The people who fled the settled world often became makers of new settled worlds. They drained marshes, cut woodland, built fish ponds, planted orchards, tended vines, raised sheep, copied books, and taught surrounding communities new rhythms of labour and devotion. The wish to withdraw could end by reshaping the landscape for miles around. Yet the old tension never disappeared. Was the monastery a retreat from the world, or a tool for changing it? Was the holy life best lived alone, or among brothers and sisters whose faults scraped against one another daily? Was poverty still poverty if the community became rich, even while individual members owned nothing? These questions did not arrive suddenly. They were planted in the first movement from desert solitude to organised life. The climate of Europe gave those questions new forms. Long winters made communal storage essential. Damp threatened books, clothing, and health. Short growing seasons demanded planning. Rivers flooded, frost cracked stone. Forests could shelter both animals and danger. A monastery in such conditions needed barns, roofs, drains, cellars, firewood, tools, and skilled hands. Ascetic longing had to learn practical management. Without grain, the brothers could not chant. Without wool, they could not endure winter. Without clean water, holiness weakened into sickness. Thus the hidden origins of medieval monasteries lie not only in spiritual hunger, but in adaptation. The rule of life grew out of weather, soil, distance, hunger, and fear. Bells answered darkness. Fasting answered desire. Cloisters answered distraction. Gardens answered illness. Walls answered danger. Libraries answered loss. Cemeteries answered the constant nearness of death. In the beginning, there was a person walking away. Then there was another. Then a path formed in the dust. Over time, that path crossed deserts, rivers, mountains, forests, seas, and kingdoms. It gathered stories, disciplines, wounds, and questions. It entered Europe and took root in colder soil. It changed shape, but it didn't forget its first lesson, that the world outside and the world within are never fully separate. In the stillness of a later cloister, beneath stone arches and rain-dark tiles, the desert remained, not as sand, as a memory of testing, as a suspicion of comfort, as a quiet belief that by leaving the world, a person might finally see it clearly. The day begins before the village roosters call. In the dormitory, the air is cold, and darkness presses against the shutters. A bell sounds from somewhere near the church, not loud enough to shatter the night, but firm enough to enter every sleeping mind. One by one, bodies stir beneath woolen blankets. A cough, a whispered prayer, the scrape of bare feet or sandals on wooden boards. The brothers rise in silence, not because they have no thoughts, but because speech belongs to the proper hour. The first labour of the monastery is waking. To leave sleep willingly, again and again, is part of the discipline. A monk fastens his belt, pulls his hood over his head, and moves with the others through the dim passage toward the church. In winter, breath clouds faintly in the air. In summer, dawn may already be gathering beyond the eastern windows. The body wants warmth, but the bell asks for obedience. The soul is trained through small refusals. Inside the church, lamps burn low. The voices begin. Chant rises slowly without hurry, shaped by memory and repetition. The words have been sung so many times that they seem to belong to the stone itself. Some voices are strong, some are thin with age. A young novice loses his place, then finds it again by listening to the man beside him. The music is not performed for an audience. It is offered into darkness, as if each note helps hold the night in order until morning arrives. Yet prayer is only one part of the hidden life. When the office ends, the monastery does not float above the earth. It returns to bread, water, wool, fire, ink, soil, sickness, and tools. The same hands lifted in worship must carry buckets, knead dough, scrape parchment, weed gardens, wash bowls, mend robes, bind wounds, and turn pages. Holiness is not imagined as escape from ordinary things. It is pressed into them, hour by hour. In the kitchen, the day smells different. Smoke curls from the hearth. A brother feeds kindling beneath a blackened pot. Another measures grain or stirs pottage made from peas, beans, leeks, onions, or whatever the season permits. Bread is the steady heart of the table. It may be dark, coarse, and heavy, cut into portions with practiced care. On certain days there is fish, cheese, eggs, fruit, or ale. Meat is limited or absent in many houses, though practice varies by rule, region, wealth, and period. The kitchen knows what the chapel forgets. Bodies are not pure spirit. They tire, complain, hunger, age, and fail. A community can speak of heaven, but it must still decide how much flour remains, whether the beans have spoiled, who is too weak for fasting, and how to feed an unexpected guest at the gate. The cellarer, responsible for provisions, carries a burden as serious as any prayer. A mistake in storage can become sickness. A bad harvest can become fear. In the refectory, meals are orderly. The monks enter quietly. They sit according to rank or custom. A reader stands at a lectern and speaks from scripture, saints' lives, or another approved text while the others eat without conversation. Wooden bowls, cups, knives, and spoons mark each place. The meal is simple, but simplicity does not mean absence of tension. One brother may notice that another received a larger portion. Another may fight irritation at the sound of chewing. Hunger can reveal pride more sharply than abundance. Small things matter here. A dropped cup may disturb the room. A late arrival may require correction. A careless gesture may be treated as a sign of inner disorder. To modern eyes this may seem severe, but the monastery is a school of attention. It assumes that the soul shows itself in the hands, the eyes, the pace of walking, the tone of a response, and the willingness to accept less than one desires. Outside, work spreads across the enclosure. In the garden, herbs grow in ordered beds. Sage, rue, fennel, mint, parsley, hyssop, and other plants may be tended for cooking, medicine, fragrance, and ritual use. The earth is dark under the fingernails. Bees move among blossoms. A monk bends slowly to pull weeds, his back aching under the sun. Nearby, fruit trees stand in rows, and beyond them, perhaps, are vegetable beds, vineyards, orchards, or fish ponds fed by channeled water. The garden is not merely pleasant, it is a map of usefulness. Plants are known by taste, smell, virtue, season, and danger. Some cool fevers, some ease digestion, some soothe wounds, some flavour thin meals, some are gathered for the infirmary, where the quietest secrets of the monastery are not political or forbidden, but bodily. Here, beneath clean cloths and the scent of crushed herbs, monks confront suffering that no chant can postpone forever. The infirmary is a softer world. Rules may bend for the sick. A brother too weak for common meals may receive better food. A fire may be kept brighter. Bedding may be warmer. The old and ill sleep apart from the main dormitory, where the needs of the body are not hidden, but watched with careful mercy. There are basins, cups, bandages, salves, small knives, mortars, pestles, and the steady patience of those who have seen many fevers rise and fall. Pain changes the rhythm of prayer. A dying monk may hear the offices from a distance. Each chant arriving through walls like a tide. A friend sits nearby, whispering psalms. Another prepares water. The community understands death as passage, but that does not make the human face less tender at the end. Tears are not always recorded. They are still present, elsewhere. Wool waits to be washed, carded, spun, and woven. Robes must be made and repaired. Shoes must be patched. Candles must be formed from tallow or beeswax. Tools need handles. Doors need hinges. Roofs need care. The monastery may be enclosed, but it contains many crafts. Some are performed by monks, others by lay brothers, servants, tenants, or hired workers, depending on the size and custom of the house. The hidden world is full of hands. Hands stirring vats, hands copying letters, hands ringing bells, hands cleaning wounds, hands turning soil, hands folding linen, hands counting loaves, hands closing the eyes of the dead. Every task carries a place within the whole, and yet every task can become a test. A monk assigned to humble labour may feel insulted. Another praised for beautiful handwriting may begin to love praise more than God. The struggle is not outside the work. It is inside it. In the writing room, the air grows still. Parchment lies on a board. A quill rests near a horn of ink. The scribe bends forward, careful not to blot the page. Light matters greatly. Too little strains the eye. Too much heat may damage materials. The letters advance slowly, line by line. A single book may require months of labour, and mistakes must be corrected with scraping, patience, and sometimes embarrassment. Margins become places of discipline, memory, and occasionally quiet personality. A tired scribe may leave traces, a correction, a mark, a little pointing hand, a small creature drawn beside a solemn text, a complaint about cold fingers, a note that the work is finished. Thanks be to God. These signs bring the past close. They reveal not an institution of stone alone, but human concentration, fatigue, humour, frustration, pride, and relief. The bell keeps returning. It divides the hours and prevents the day from dissolving into private desire. Prayer, reading, labour, meals, rest, and silence follow one another like steps in a long procession. No day is quite the same, because weather changes, guests arrive, illness spreads, repairs become urgent, letters come, animals stray, tempers fail, and harvests disappoint. Yet the shape remains. Within that shape, identity is remade. A monk is no longer simply a son of one family or a man from one village. A nun is no longer defined only by marriage prospect, widowhood, or household rank. Inside the enclosure, each person belongs to a community that eats together, prays together, fails together, and remembers its dead together. The individual does not vanish, but is pressed into a shared rhythm until even private sorrow finds a communal hour. At night the dormitory settles again. The tools are put away. The bowls are washed. The last light fades along the cloister walk. In the garden, damp rises from the soil. In the infirmary, someone turns into uneasy sleep. In the library, ink dries on a page that may outlive every living hand in the house. The monastery grows dark, but not empty. It is breathing. Through bread, bells, ink, and wool, a hidden civilization has spent another day teaching fragile bodies to live by eternal time. Authority enters the monastery quietly. It does not always arrive with a sword, a crown, or a raised voice. Often it comes in the form of a rule read aloud in a room of listening faces. It comes through a bell rung at the proper hour, a seat assigned at table, a correction given in public, a key kept by one brother rather than another. It comes through habits repeated so often that obedience begins to feel like the natural weather of the soul. Every enclosed community needs order. Without it, prayer becomes confusion, labour becomes dispute, and silence becomes resentment. A monastery gathers people who have brought their memories, tempers, wounds, skills, pride, fears, and private griefs into a narrow space. They share walls, food, worship, and sleep. They cannot simply walk away when irritation grows. So the first great structure of power is not stone. It is discipline. At the centre stands the abbot, or in a house of women, the abbess. This figure is not merely a manager. In the imagination of the community, the abbot carries a spiritual burden, charged with guiding souls that may be stubborn, frightened, lazy, gifted, proud, or broken. He must judge when to be stern and when to be gentle. He must protect the goods of the house without loving wealth too much. He must listen, command, comfort, punish, negotiate, pray, and answer for the community before God. Such authority could be holy. It could also be dangerous. A wise superior might hold a divided monastery together through famine, debt, scandal, or war. A foolish one might waste resources, favour relatives, silence critics, or turn correction into cruelty. The rule might describe humility, but human office always carries temptation. To govern those who have vowed obedience is to stand close to power, even when dressed in plain wool. Beneath the abbot are other offices. The prior helps maintain daily order. The cellarer oversees food, drink, tools, animals, and stores. The sacrist cares for the church, vessels, candles, vestments, and sacred objects. The infirmarian tends the sick. The novice master watches those still being formed. The guest master receives travellers. The almoner distributes charity. The cantor oversees singing. The librarian or armorius may guard books, writing materials, and sometimes the intellectual memory of the house. Each office is practical. Each office is also a trust. A key to the cellar can mean access to wine, grain, cheeses, and honey. A key to the sacristy can mean custody of silver, relics, and embroidered cloth. A key to the archive can mean control over documents that prove rights and settle disputes. In a monastery, holiness does not remove the importance of locks. It multiplies them. The chapter house becomes one of the most important rooms. Here the community gathers, often after morning prayer, seated along walls beneath carved stone or timber beams. A portion of the rule may be read. Names of the dead may be remembered. Work may be assigned. Faults may be confessed or reported. Decisions may be announced. The room is called chapter because a chapter of the rule is heard there. But it is also a place where the hidden machinery of communal life reveals itself. A brother who broke silence may kneel there. Another who arrived late may be corrected. A dispute may be settled before it spreads. The mood can be solemn, tender, or tense. Public correction is meant to heal the community, but it can cut deeply. Shame has a long memory. A monk accused unfairly may carry the wound for years. Another may learn to confess quickly, not from humility, but from fear. The ideal is spiritual medicine. The reality depends on the hands that administer it. Rules create visible boundaries. They tell when to speak, when to eat, when to fast, where to sleep, how to receive guests, how to care for the sick, how to treat tools, how to correct the young, and how to bury the dead. They regulate clothing, private possessions, reading, travel, laughter, and contact with the outside world. The aim is not only order, it is transformation. The rule assumes that a disordered life cannot become holy by feeling alone. But rules also reveal anxieties. If a command forbids private food, someone has hidden food. If a rule warns against wandering eyes, someone has been distracted. If it insists that tools be returned properly, tools have gone missing. If it condemns murmuring, complaints have moved under the surface like water beneath ice. Every law is a faint echo of a problem. The monastery is built upon ideals, yet its laws are built around human weakness. That is one of its most revealing secrets. Punishments vary by house, period, and severity. A minor fault may bring correction, extra prayer, temporary silence, loss of a portion at table, or exclusion from certain communal privileges. Serious offences may bring confinement, removal from office, public penance, or expulsion. Some communities are gentle, others are harsh. In every case, discipline is meant to restore the broken pattern, though the path between restoration and humiliation can be painfully thin. The novice learns this early. He's watched not only in church, but in ordinary gestures. Does he hurry? Does he stare? Does he laugh too loudly? Does he resist instruction? Does he keep his bedding in order? Does he eat greedily? Does he seek admiration? The training is detailed because the monastery believes the soul hides in details. A careless hand can reveal a careless heart. A patient hand can begin to reshape one. At the same time, authority must reach beyond the cloister. A monastery that owns land needs stewards, agreements, rents, records, and courts. It may need to defend boundaries against neighbouring lords, settle disputes with tenants, manage mills, collect produce, repair bridges, and negotiate privileges. The abbot who preaches humility may ride to meet nobles. The abbess who governs enclosed women may command estates through agents and documents. Spiritual authority becomes legal authority. Legal authority becomes economic power. The wall encloses prayer. It does not enclose influence. This creates another hidden tension. The vow of poverty belongs to individuals, but the community may possess fields, barns, flocks, vineyards, gold vessels, books, and rights over labour. A monk may own nothing personally while living in an institution wealthier than the villages nearby. The distinction is sincere in theory, yet difficult in daily life. Comfort can enter through the side door of collective ownership. Taxes, dues, and rents are not abstract to those who pay them. A tenant may look toward the abbey and see holiness. He may also see the landlord who collects grain. A widow may be grateful for charity at the gate, yet anxious about obligations owed by her small holding. A noble may donate land for the health of his soul, then expect influence over appointments. The monastery's authority is never purely spiritual once it becomes rooted in property. Fortifications make the point visible. Not every monastery has strong defences, but many need walls, gates, towers, ditches, or secure doors. The world outside can be violent. Raiders, unpaid soldiers, thieves, angry neighbours, and rival claimants may threaten property and people. A monastery may preach peace while storing weapons nearby or hiring guards. It may shelter the helpless while barring the desperate. Mercy and caution stand at the same gate, watching each other. Inside, even sacred space has hierarchy. The choir has ordered places. The refectory has rank. The cemetery may distinguish founders, abbots, benefactors, and ordinary members. The church may hold privileged tombs close to the altar. The chapter house may preserve the voices of office holders more clearly than the silent labourers who kept the fires burning. Equality before God does not erase structure on earth. And yet, power is not only domination. At its best, monastic authority gives shape to fragile lives. It protects time for prayer. It preserves peace among people who might otherwise fracture. It ensures that the sick are noticed, the hungry are fed, the guest is received, the dead are remembered, and the book is copied rather than lost. Order can be a kindness when the world beyond the walls is uncertain. For a while the system holds. The bell rings, the offices gather, the storerooms are counted and the rule is read, the doors are locked. The abbot listens in the chapter house while sunlight falls across the floor. Outside, Fields ripen under clouds. Inside, a brother lowers his head to accept correction, and another waits for the key that will allow him to open the day's work. Beneath the prayers, beneath the stone, beneath the silence, the monastery has become a governed world, small, enclosed, and disciplined. Kingdom without a throne, household without blood, a city of vows where authority moves softly but leaves deep marks on every life it touches. Benedict appears in memory as a man stepping away from noise. The city behind him is Rome, ancient, wounded, magnificent, and uneasy. Its old monuments still stand in broken grandeur. Its streets carry arguments, processions, business, hunger, ambition, and decay. The empire that once seemed eternal has changed beyond recognition in the West. New powers move through old provinces. Families seek safety where they can. Young men of good birth still receive education, but the world around them no longer feels securely held. Benedict is said to have gone to Rome for study. He does not remain. The stories remember him as troubled by the moral disorder around him, by the vanity of students, by the fragility of worldly success. Whether every detail is exact matters less than the pattern preserved by those who honoured him. A young man sees a civilization glittering with memory and shadowed by instability. He chooses not to climb within it. He walks away. His path leads towards Subiaco. There, in a rugged landscape of cliffs, ravines, water, and caves, he enters a deeper school. The air is sharper than the city air. Rock rises above him. The valley holds echoes. A cave becomes his dwelling, not a romantic refuge, but a hard chamber where damp, cold, hunger, and loneliness begin their slow instruction. He learns what no teacher in a lecture hall can give him. He learns the weight of the self when everything else is removed. Solitude does not make him invisible. People begin to come. A holy man hidden in a cave becomes known precisely because he hides. Shepherds, villagers, seekers, and disciples are drawn toward him. They bring questions, reverence, needs, and expectations. The man who fled disorder now faces a different danger, the disorder of admiration. Fame can enter even a cave. It can warm the heart more dangerously than a fire. A leader is being formed, but not in the manner of kings. No army gathers around him. No banner rises. His authority comes from endurance, restraint, and a reputation for spiritual clarity. Those who seek him do not ask him to conquer cities. They ask him how to live. That question is quieter than war, but more difficult to answer, because it must govern bread, sleep, anger, obedience, prayer, speech, pride, and the invisible motions of thought. Tradition tells of conflict as well as holiness. Some communities desire a strict guide, then resist the strictness. Discipline can look beautiful from a distance and unbearable at close range. A teacher who seems saintly when silent may become unwelcome when he corrects appetite, laziness, envy, or self-will. Stories around Benedict include danger, betrayal, and attempted poisoning. Whether read as literal memory or moral warning, they reveal a truth that every monastery understood. Reform provokes resistance. The path of order is never innocent. It wounds what disorder has protected. Benedict eventually becomes associated with Monte Cassino, a high place between Rome and Naples. Imagine the ascent, the stone underfoot, the wide view opening over hills and valleys, the old pagan memories still lingering in rural sanctuaries, the pressure of a world where Christianity has spread but not erased every older habit. A monastery founded there is not merely a retreat. It is an act of claiming space, time, and imagination. At Monte Cassino, the idea takes architectural form. Men will not simply admire a holy hermit. They will live by a pattern. They will sleep, eat, pray, work, read, obey, receive correction, welcome guests, care for tools, treat the sick, and bury the dead according to an ordered vision. A scattered longing becomes a durable institution. The fragile fire of solitary devotion is placed inside a lamp designed to keep burning. The heart of Benedict's legacy is a rule. Not the first rule, and not the only one, but one of extraordinary balance and staying power. Its genius lies partly in moderation. It does not demand the most extreme ascetic heroism from every person. It recognizes weakness, age, illness, climate, rank, and human limitation. It asks for seriousness without theatrical severity. It organizes a complete way of life, firm enough to endure, flexible enough to travel. The rule speaks in a paternal voice. It calls the listener to return through obedience. It imagines the monastery as a school for the service of the Lord. It instructs the abbot to be both strong and compassionate, to adapt discipline to different characters, to remember that souls are not all healed by the same medicine. It warns against private possession, idleness, murmuring, pride, favoritism, and careless speech. It treats humility not as a decorative virtue, but as a ladder climbed one painful rung at a time. The daily rhythm becomes sacred engineering. Prayer divides the hours. Reading feeds the mind. Manual labor guards against idleness. Silence protects attention. Common meals restrain appetite. Shared sleep limits privacy. Obedience breaks self-will. Hospitality opens the gate to Christ in the stranger. Care for the sick reveals whether discipline has become cruelty or love. Every part is connected. Remove one piece, and the whole structure trembles. This is not a dream of escape from the body. It is a method for training it. The rule understands that holiness cannot depend on rare emotion. Feelings rise and fall like weather. Hunger irritates. Cold discourages. Weariness dulls the mind. Praise intoxicates. Boredom corrodes. So Benedict's way relies on repeated action. Rise, pray, work, read, eat, listen, confess, begin again. The soul is shaped not by one grand moment, but by thousands of small returns. Here lies the quiet force of his vision. It can be copied. A charismatic hermit dies, and his presence fades into story. A rule can move from valley to valley. It can be read aloud to men who never saw the founder's face. It can cross mountains, seas, kingdoms, and languages. It can enter poor houses and wealthy ones, royal foundations and remote priories. It can be interpreted, softened, sharpened, neglected, and revived. But it remains a measuring rod. The personality becomes a pattern. The pattern becomes a civilization. Benedict himself, as history can truly grasp him, stands partly in shadow. Much of what later people believed about him comes through reverent storytelling. Miracles gather around his name. Broken vessels are restored. Hidden sins are revealed. Dangers are foreseen. A sister, Scholastica, appears in memory with tenderness and power, reminding even a revered holy man that love may understand heaven in ways law cannot measure. These stories are not casual ornaments. They show what later communities needed Benedict to be: founder, father, lawgiver, wonder-worker, guardian of balance, master of obedience, man of solitude who created community, man of withdrawal who shaped public history. His image became a vessel into which generations poured their hopes for disciplined peace. But beneath the honour remains the harder human question. How does one turn longing into a life that can survive Tuesday morning, winter sickness, dull work, irritating companions, and the slow erosion of zeal? Benedict's answer is not spectacle. It is order with mercy, authority with accountability, poverty without chaos, silence without contempt, work without worldliness, prayer without escape from responsibility. The monastery, shaped by this vision, becomes more than a shelter for the devout. It becomes a machine for continuity. A young novice enters not merely to admire holiness, but to be remade by schedule, correction, labour, song, and shared endurance. An abbot governs not by impulse alone, but under a text that judges him too. A community measures its failures against written expectations. Memory becomes daily practice. The founder's voice continues to speak whenever the rule is opened and read. And still, the rule does not erase mystery. It cannot force humility into a proud heart. It cannot make every superior wise. It cannot prevent wealth from tempting a successful house. It cannot keep ambition from hiding beneath pious language. It gives a form, not a guarantee. Inside that form, every generation must decide whether obedience is alive or merely performed. As evening settles over Monte Cassino in the mind's eye, the scene is quiet. A lamp burns near a manuscript. A brother closes a door against the wind. Footsteps pass toward the church. The hills darken below the monastery, and the road disappears into blue distance. Somewhere within the enclosure, the rule waits to be read again, its words simple, stern, and strangely durable. A man once walked away from Rome. In his leaving, he gave countless others a way to remain. The writing room is cold before sunrise. A thin light gathers at the window, grey and uncertain, while the first scribes take their places at sloped desks. The room smells of scraped skin, soot-black ink, wax, damp wool, and old wood. No one speaks without need. A quill is lifted, a page is steadied, a knife rests nearby, ready to correct errors by scraping away the surface of the parchment one careful layer at a time. Here, memory moves slowly. A single letter may take several strokes. A line must be spaced, ruled, and watched. A mistake can spread confusion across a sacred text, a legal formula, a medical recipe, or an ancient poem. The scribe's eye moves from exemplar to blank page, from old words to new surface, from fading script to fresh ink. Outside, storms may travel over fields. Inside, a different battle is being fought. It is a war against forgetting. The enemy has many faces. Fire can devour a library in an hour. Damp can swell boards, stain parchment, and invite mould. Mice can gnaw corners. Worms can tunnel through pages. War can scatter books into mud. Neglect can be as destructive as violence. A text not copied may simply die, not with a cry, but with a quiet fading, until no living person knows it ever existed. The scribe knows this, even if he never says it. Every book is a survivor. Before words can be preserved, materials must be prepared. Parchment begins as animal skin, soaked, stretched, scraped, dried, and cut. Its surface can be smooth or stubborn, pale or yellowed, thick or thin. Ink may be made from oak galls, iron salts, soot, or other mixtures, each with its own temperament. Pigments must be ground, gold must be handled with care. Boards, leather, thread, clasps, and glue will eventually turn loose pages into a body that can be opened, carried, guarded, and kissed. A book is not only written, it is built. The labour touches many hands. One person prepares skins. Another rules lines with a point. Another copies the main text. Another adds initials in red or blue. Another paints leaves, beasts, saints, vines, stars, and strange creatures that creep through margins. Another binds the gatherings. Another repairs damage years later, perhaps centuries later, without knowing the name of the first maker. In some scriptoria, the work is plain and severe. In others, beauty opens like a garden. A capital letter may become a doorway filled with curling leaves. A saint may stand beneath a painted arch. A dragon may bite its own tail in the margin. A monk may draw a bird, a dog, or a grinning face beside solemn lines. These images are not random decoration alone. They guide attention, mark structure, teach stories, and sometimes reveal imagination pressing quietly against discipline. But the room is not always peaceful. A scribe's back aches. His fingers stiffen. His eyes blur in winter light. Ink freezes or thickens. A page may be ruined after hours of work. The exemplar may be damaged, abbreviated, or difficult to read. A fly may land in wet ink. A candle may smoke. A superior may demand speed. The body grows tired long before the task is done. Sometimes the margins confess what the formal text conceals. The scribe may ask for prayers. He may note the cold. He may celebrate reaching the end. He may curse the difficulty of the work in language too human to be mistaken for stone. These small traces are quiet revelations. They let the listener feel a living person behind the solemn manuscript, not an anonymous hand, but someone with sore fingers, a wandering mind, and a hope that the labour mattered. What then did monasteries copy? They copied scripture above all, the Psalms, Gospels, epistles, commentaries, and books needed for worship. They copied the lives of saints, sermons, liturgical calendars, penitential texts, rules, prayers, and theological works. They copied chronicles that arranged years into meaning. They copied charters that protected lands and privileges. They copied letters that carried instruction, warning, comfort, and authority. Yet the shelves could hold more. Grammar books, medical recipes, herbals, computistical tables for calculating Easter, legal collections, classical Latin authors, fragments of philosophy, poems from worlds no monk had seen, histories of peoples who worshipped other gods, astronomical notes, glossaries, school texts, practical lists. The library was not modern in its openness, but neither was it narrow in the way imagination sometimes makes it. The monastery preserved because it needed, valued, feared, debated, and inherited. There was danger in preservation. A book could trouble a reader. An ancient argument might not fit comfortably beside doctrine. A legal document could challenge a lord. A chronicle could remember a shameful act. A medical text might contain remedies half learned from older worlds, with knowledge mingled with error. To keep a text was to allow it a future. To copy it was to choose, knowingly or not, what later ages might still hear. Selection was power. So was omission. Many works vanished because no one copied them. Others survived through one fragile thread, a single manuscript, a single library, a single decision made by a tired hand on a winter afternoon. What appears to later centuries as destiny may have depended on accidents, taste, need, weather, money, and available parchment. The survival of memory was not smooth. It was uneven, vulnerable, and deeply human. The threat of violence made the work more urgent. When raiders struck coasts and river valleys, monasteries could burn. Books were heavy, awkward, and not always the first things saved when lives were in danger. A community might carry a relic, a gospel book, and a few charters while leaving other volumes behind. A library could be reduced to ash, and with it the patient labour of generations. Even distant rumours of attack could make a librarian look at his shelves differently. In quieter times, another danger grew from inside. A book might be chained, locked away, neglected, or misunderstood. A script could become hard to read as writing styles changed. Abbreviations could puzzle new readers. Languages shifted. Interests changed. A text once central could become obscure. The war against forgetting required not only copying, but teaching people how to read what had been copied. Thus the writing room joined the schoolroom. A child or novice learned letters, syllables, psalms, grammar and chant. He stumbled over cases, endings, accents, and unfamiliar words. He repeated until memory formed grooves in the mind. Education was discipline by another name. It trained not only the hand, but attention itself. To read well was to enter a conversation with the dead, and the dead demanded patience. The secrets kept in the scriptorium were rarely simple secrets. They were hidden because they were difficult, costly, and slow. Hidden because few could read them. Hidden because the language of the page belonged to those trained to unlock it. Hidden because the meaning of a manuscript could change depending on who opened it. A monk at prayer, a lawyer in dispute, a physician at a bedside, a ruler seeking proof, or a scholar searching for a lost voice. At dusk, the writing room darkens. The quills are cleaned, the knives are set down. A half-finished page waits beneath a weight to keep it flat. The last light touches the wet shine of one fresh line, then fades. Somewhere in the building, the bell calls the community away from desks and toward chant. The books remain behind, closed and silent, as if sleeping. But they are not dead. They are seeds. Inside their covers lie laws, prayers, medicines, memories, errors, maps of heaven, records of land, visions of saints, and fragments of vanished empires. They wait through winter, war, neglect, reform, fire, and rediscovery. Some will disappear. Some will travel farther than their makers ever walked. Some will speak in ages that cannot imagine the cold room where they were made. In the stillness of ink and parchment, the monastery becomes something larger than a shelter. It becomes a bridge across time. Power grows most quietly when it learns to organize itself. A monastery may begin with prayer, but it endures through systems. Fields must be measured, rents must be remembered, guests must be fed, letters must be answered, disputes must be settled, roads must be watched, mills must turn at the right season. A sick ox, a broken bridge, a flooded meadow, or a missing charter can disturb the rhythm of a holy house as surely as a failure in worship. So the cloister learns administration. It does not happen all at once. A gift of land becomes a record becomes a claim becomes an archive. A field granted for prayers becomes part of a larger estate, and the estate demands stewards, boundaries, witnesses, accounts, labour agreements, and yearly reckoning. The monastery becomes a place where the invisible is constantly made visible through ink, seal, oath, and memory. The land around an abbey is never empty. It is crossed by paths, hedges, streams, ditches, rights, duties, and old arguments. One man grazes pigs in woodland because his father did. Another cuts hay from a meadow because a charter says so. A miller takes a portion of grain because custom allows it. A tenant owes hens at a feast day, labour at harvest, coin at a term, or service with a cart when heavy loads must be moved. Every obligation has a story. Every story needs someone to remember it. In the accounting room, memory becomes practical. Tallies are checked. Wax tablets may hold temporary notes. Parchment preserves formal arrangements. Grain, wool, wine, fish, timber, salt, honey, cheese, and coin pass through the monastery's orbit. A good cellarer sees the year as a living body, lean in one season, swollen in another. He must know what can be consumed, what must be stored, what can be sold, and what must be reserved against hunger. The monks pray for eternity. Their stewards count barrels. This is not hypocrisy. It is survival. A community that cannot manage harvest cannot maintain hospitality. A house that loses its documents may lose the lands that feed it. A library without income cannot easily acquire parchment. A church without candles loses ritual brightness. Spiritual life depends upon ordinary materials, and ordinary materials demand management. The monastery's reach extends through dependent cells and priories. A great abbey may have smaller houses tied to it across regions, sometimes nearby, sometimes at impressive distance. These daughter houses carry influence outward, like sparks from a central flame. They may follow the customs of the mother house, send reports, receive visitors, and help create a family of discipline spread over many landscapes. The result is not one empire in the royal sense, but a web. Within that web, people move. A gifted monk may be sent to reform a struggling house. A trusted brother may carry letters sealed against rain. A novice may be transferred. A manuscript may travel with a messenger. A dispute may bring representatives to a distant chapter or court. An abbey is rooted in one place, yet its influence walks, rides, sails, and writes. Hospitality turns roads into relationships. A traveller arrives at the guest house with mud on his cloak and exhaustion in his bones. He may be a pilgrim, bishop, merchant, messenger, scholar, poor wanderer, or noble retinue demanding more than the house can easily spare. The guest master must receive him with courtesy, but also judgment. Guests bring news, they bring disease, they bring letters, they bring opportunity, danger, and rumour from places beyond the horizon. At the gate the world speaks. A monastery that receives travellers becomes an information centre. News of wars, failed harvests, royal deaths, church councils, strange weather, new taxes, miracles, crimes, and distant scandals can arrive with wet boots and hungry mouths. Not every rumour is believed, but some are copied, repeated, or quietly stored. The cloister may be enclosed, yet the guest house keeps it alert to movement. Schools deepen the network further. Some monasteries educate boys offered to the religious life. Others instruct clerics, noble children, or selected outsiders. Learning creates loyalty. A student who becomes a bishop, secretary, physician, or royal advisor may remember the house that trained him. Books, teachers, and disciplined literacy give monasteries a role in shaping minds that later move through courts, cathedrals, and chancelleries. Education is a form of expansion. No army is needed. A trained mind carries the monastery's influence farther than a cart can travel. The habits learned in cloistered schooling, attention to text, reverence for authority, memory work, Latin grammar, orderly reasoning, and respect for written proof become part of the governing culture of medieval society. In this way, monastic discipline seeps into law, administration, preaching, and record-keeping. Medicine also carries influence. The infirmary serves the community, but knowledge of herbs, diet, bleeding, bathing, rest, and remedies may reach beyond the enclosure. Some houses maintain gardens designed for healing. Some preserve recipes that combine inherited learning with local experiment. People come seeking help for fever, wounds, childbirth fears, skin diseases, stomach pains, and the frailty of age. Not every remedy works. Some harm as much as heal. Yet the monastery represents ordered care in a world where sickness often feels like abandonment. Charity strengthens both compassion and reputation. At appointed times, food may be given to the poor on certain days. Alms are distributed in memory of founders or benefactors. Feet may be washed. Old clothes may be passed on. The hungry gather near the gate, watching for the moment when the porter appears. In such gestures, the monastery performs mercy publicly, and public mercy shapes memory. People remember where bread was given, but mercy can create hard questions. How much can be given without endangering the house? Who deserves help? What happens when famine brings too many mouths? Does charity ease suffering, or does it display power? A monastery's generosity may be sincere, yet it also confirms its place above those who wait outside the gate. The giver and the receiver stand within a relationship shaped by need, faith, gratitude, resentment, and dependence. Relics turn influence into sacred magnetism. A bone, tooth, cloth, hair, fragment of a cross, or object linked to a saint can transform a house's fortunes. Pilgrims come, offerings increase, markets grow around feast days, roads improve through use, stories of healing or protection spread by word of mouth. A monastery with a powerful relic does not merely possess an object. It holds a point of contact between earth and heaven, at least in the eyes of believers. Such possession must be defended. Relics can be stolen, disputed, embellished, or doubted. Their containers may be jewelled. Their histories may be written with great care. Processions display them. Oaths may be sworn before them. Rival houses may compete for attention. The sacred and the economic become intertwined, not because faith is false, but because faith attracts bodies, gifts, movement, and memory. Architecture makes durability visible. A larger church announces stability. Stone vaults, carved portals, painted walls, cloister arcades, towers, dormitories, refectories, and chapter houses show that an institution expects to remain. Builders require money, quarrying, transport, masons, carpenters, metalworkers, glaziers, and planning. A monastery under construction becomes a whole economy of sound. Hammer on chisel, cart on road, rope under strain, shouted measures, dust in sunlight. The building itself becomes a message. It says that prayer has weight. It says that memory deserves stone. Through all these systems, power becomes durable, not merely because monks are devout or because patrons are generous, but because the monastery learns how to bind prayer, property, record, ritual, education, charity, hospitality, and labour into one lasting form. Each part supports another. Remove the archive, and land is threatened. Remove land, and books decline. Remove discipline, and reputation weakens. Remove reputation, and gifts diminish. The hidden world is no longer small. It reaches through roads, fields, classrooms, sick rooms, courts, markets, and graves. Its strength lies in connection so ordinary that it can be missed. A candle on an altar depends on bees and hands. A book depends on pasture and skin. A chant depends on bread. A land claim depends on ink. A pilgrim's prayer depends on safe passage. A stone tower depends on 1,000 transactions never carved into its walls. At evening, the monastery settles into apparent stillness. The accounts are closed, the guests sleep, the cattle stand in shadow. The mill stream turns black beneath the trees. In the archive, documents lie folded or rolled, their seals cool in the dark. In the church, voices rise again, measured and low, as though nothing beyond worship matters. Yet beneath that calm sound, a system is alive. It remembers. It manages. It reaches. And because it reaches, it lasts. At the height of monastic life, the cloister can seem like a small universe enclosed in stone. Morning light enters through arches and falls across the walk in pale rectangles. The garden at the centre is damp with dew. A fountain murmurs, or perhaps there is only a covered well, a fig tree, a patch of herbs, and a narrow path worn smooth by years of sandalled feet. Around this open square, the community moves from church to refectory, from chapter house to dormitory, from labour to prayer, as though circling a sacred map. The design is never accidental. The cloister gathers the world into order. Its four-walk shape movement. Its central garden offers a glimpse of paradise, not wild and unreachable, but measured, cultivated, and enclosed. The church rises nearby as the highest purpose of the whole body of buildings. The refectory feeds, the dormitory rests, the chapter house judges, the library remembers, the infirmary heals. Every space has a moral meaning. For a while the world seems still, but that stillness is full of art. In the church, colour glows in candlelight. Painted saints watch from walls or panels. Carved capitals twist into leaves, beasts, vines, and human faces. The altar cloth may be embroidered by careful hands. A reliquary may shine with metalwork and stones, drawing the eye toward mystery. Even in houses that value restraint, beauty finds its way through proportion, chant, clean stone, polished wood, and the movement of ritual. The greatest treasure is not always gold. Sometimes it is sound. When the community sings, the building becomes an instrument. Voices rise and meet the vaults, then return softened, deepened, and mingled. Plainchant moves without haste, shaped by breath and memory. The words are old, but each singing makes them present again. A monk may be tired, distracted, or ill, yet his voice joins the others and disappears into the whole. Individual weakness is carried by communal sound. Music gives the hours a soul. It marks dawn, night, feasts, funerals, fasting days, and the turning of the year. The liturgical calendar creates another kind of time, layered over seed time, harvest, winter, and spring. Ordinary days flow into saints' days. Advent darkens toward Christmas. Lent thins the table and sharpens the mind. Easter arrives with light, bells, and release. The year is not merely counted, it is inhabited as a sacred drama. The monastery teaches people to live inside that drama. A feast does not only remember an event, it changes food, clothing, song, gesture, reading, and mood. A fast does not only reduce the meal, it alters the body's awareness of desire. A vigil stretches the night. A procession carries prayer through space, moving around church, cloister, cemetery, fields, or boundary points. Ritual turns the landscape itself into a text that can be walked. Outside the church, the workshops have their own beauty. A carpenter smooths a board until the grain rises under his hand. A metal worker repairs a hinge or shapes a clasp for a book. A candle maker pours warm wax into moulds. A gardener ties vines against a wall. A brewer watches fermentation. A baker judges the heat of the oven by experience more than measurement. These labours rarely receive the glory of painted manuscripts, yet they make glory possible. A golden age is not only made by great names, it is made by repetition done well. In a manuscript room, brilliance takes patient form, blue from costly pigment, red from mineral or plant, green from careful mixtures, gold leaf pressed until it catches light like dawn on water. A page may open with an initial so elaborate that a reader pauses before entering the text. Saints stand calm and frontal. Monsters coil in borders. Tiny figures harvest, play music, fight, pray, or gaze out from the edges of sacred words. The margin becomes a second world. There, imagination moves with surprising freedom. A rabbit may chase a hound. A hybrid beast may grin beside a solemn commentary. A vine may become a serpent, then a letter, then a path for the eye. Such images remind us that the cloistered mind was not colourless. It could be disciplined and playful, severe and curious, obedient and inventive, all within the same page. Libraries hold the intellectual horizon. Within their chests and shelves are scriptures, commentaries, rules, sermons, grammars, chronicles, medical works, saints' lives, law collections, philosophical fragments, and books of calculation. The universe is understood as ordered, meaningful, layered with signs. The movement of stars, the timing of Easter, the number of psalms, the symbolism of animals, the structure of the human body, the virtues of herbs, and the moral reading of history all belong to a single creation. To modern eyes, this worldview can seem strange. To the medieval monastic mind, it is coherent. The visible world points beyond itself. A stone can teach firmness, a river can suggest grace, a garden can reflect Eden, a wound can recall sin, a cure can signify mercy, a storm can warn, cleanse, or test. The universe is not silent matter. It is filled with correspondences, reminders, and lessons. The task of the learned monk is to read creation without arrogance. Yet this reading is not simple superstition. It includes observation. Seasons are watched because crops depend on them. Stars are studied to calculate holy days. Herbs are tested because illness demands help. History is written because memory guides judgment. Grammar is learned because sacred text must be understood precisely. The monastic worldview joins symbolism and practicality in a way that may feel unfamiliar, but within its own frame it is deeply organized. Education shapes the mind through layers. A beginner learns letters, then psalms, then Latin grammar, then commentary, then perhaps logic, music, computus, rhetoric, or theology, depending on the house and its resources. Learning is not meant to encourage restless novelty for its own sake. It is meant to purify understanding, train memory, protect doctrine, and deepen prayer. Knowledge carries danger if severed from humility. This is why books are handled with reverence. A volume may be wrapped, stored in a chest, chained, repaired, kissed, borrowed with permission, or listed carefully in an inventory. Its physical presence matters. A book is expensive, but more than expensive, it is a vessel of authority. A poorly copied word can mislead. A missing page can wound memory. A beautiful book can honour God, patron, saint, and community at once. Social hierarchy remains visible even inside sacred order. The abbot's place is marked. Senior monks have precedence. Novices learn by watching. Lay brothers may labour more heavily and receive less education. Nuns of noble background may carry family prestige into enclosed life. Servants and workers move through the margins of the monastic world, necessary but often less remembered. The ideal of spiritual equality lives beside the stubborn realities of rank, birth, skill, age, and office. Burial customs make hierarchy permanent in stone. Founders may be placed near the altar. Abbots may lie in chapter houses or prominent graves. Benefactors seek remembrance through tombs, inscriptions, anniversary masses, and gifts. Ordinary brothers may rest in simpler ground. The cemetery is not only a place of loss, it is an archive of belonging. Each grave asks the living to continue the chain of prayer. Death is never far away. That nearness gives the golden world its seriousness. Beauty is not decoration against death, but an answer to it. Chant, candles, painted saints, ordered gardens, and careful books insist that human life can be gathered into meaning, even as bodies fail. The monastery does not deny decay. It surrounds decay with ritual. On great feast days, the enclosure may fill with controlled splendour. Bells ring longer, vestments shine, incense thickens the air. Relics are displayed. The table improves. Guests arrive. The poor may gather for alms. Candles multiply until the church seems warmer than the season allows. The community moves through gestures learned by heart, each bow and turning shaped by tradition. For those watching, the monastery appears not as an escape from the world, but as a vision of the world rightly ordered. And yet even here mystery remains. What did each monk truly feel as he sang? What did each nun think while listening to readings in the refectory? Who looked at the garden and found peace? Who looked at the same garden and felt trapped? Who painted a saint with devotion, and who painted because the work had been assigned? A golden age seen from a distance can seem smooth. Lived from within, it contains fatigue, wonder, irritation, tenderness, and longing. As night returns, the sacred universe closes softly around its people. The last lamps burn. The cloister walk cools under moonlight. A book lies closed in the library. The garden exhales the scent of damp leaves and earth. In the church, shadows gather beneath the arches where voices rose only hours earlier. The stones remember the day without speaking. Inside the enclosure, art, labour, learning, ritual and belief have made a world within the world. Small enough to cross in a few steps, vast enough to contain heaven, earth, memory, death, and the hope of paradise. At the summit of monastic power, confidence can sound like a bell. It carries across fields at dawn, over roofs silvered with frost, past barns filled with grain and sheepfolds dense with wool. It reaches the river where a mill turns under the abbey's right. It reaches the road where travellers know they may find bread and a bed. It reaches villages where tenants measure the year not only by weather and harvest, but by rents, feast days, obligations, and prayers owed to the dead. The monastery appears immovable. Its church is large, its records are deep. Its patrons include noble families, bishops, kings, widows, merchants, and anxious souls seeking remembrance. Its lands are scattered but documented. Its relics draw pilgrims. Its seals carry authority. Its abbot may sit among important men, speaking softly while decisions are shaped by law, custom, and influence. To those outside, the institution seems to have mastered time itself, but stone can hide strain. A powerful abbey may possess more than it can peacefully manage. Fields lie miles apart, tenants dispute boundaries, stewards act with rough hands. A distant manor sends less grain than expected. A woodland once promised to the monks is claimed by a knight whose grandfather swore it was never given. Charters are unfolded, witnesses are named, memory hardens into conflict. The stronger the monastery becomes, the more people have reason to challenge it. Beneath the sound of chant, lawsuits multiply. Some disputes are honest. A line between estates may be genuinely unclear. A stream may change course. A donor's heirs may resent the gift that diminished their inheritance. Other disputes are more deliberate. Powerful families sometimes gave generously in illness or fear, then later tried to recover what piety had surrendered. A monastery might defend itself with old documents, but old documents could be damaged, ambiguous, or suspected. Here, one of the darker rooms of the hidden world opens. Not every charter was pure. In an age that revered written authority, the temptation to improve the past could become very strong. A document might be copied with convenient additions. A lost privilege might be recreated from memory, or from desire dressed as memory. A boundary might be described more favourably than it had once been. Forgery did not always feel to its makers like simple fraud. Sometimes it was imagined as restoring a truth that enemies had obscured. But ink, once altered, could change lives. A meadow could shift owners. A tenant could own more. A rival could be silenced. The archive, so often pictured as a quiet sanctuary of truth, could also become a workshop of power. Documents did not merely record reality, they helped create it. The monk or clerk who wrote them might be defending the house from injustice, or extending its reach through careful words. A seal could make memory solid. A suspicious seal could make memory tremble. Wealth also changes the inner life of a community. A house founded in hardship may become comfortable through generations of gifts. The table improves. Buildings expand. Offices grow more specialized. Servants take on heavier work. The distance between rule and practice widens by small degrees. Rarely dramatic at first. a little more wine, a warmer room, a private favour, a relative appointed to a useful post, a discipline delayed because the offender has powerful friends. Decay often enters politely. It arrives as exception. One brother is excused from labour because of health, then another because of rank, then another because his family is influential. A superior travels often and returns with taste learned in noble halls. The guest house becomes costly to maintain because important visitors expect honour. The sacrist protects silver and silk, while the poor at the gate seem more numerous each year. No one announces corruption, it settles like dust. And yet the word corruption must be used carefully. Comfort is not always vice. Beauty is not always pride. A warm infirmary may be mercy. A fine book may be devotion. A generous meal for guests may honour sacred duty. The difficulty lies in the narrow space where necessary dignity becomes vanity, where prudent management becomes greed, where tradition becomes excuse, and where prayer continues while the heart grows less awake. Succession brings another weakness. An abbot dies, and the community must choose or accept a new ruler. The election may be peaceful, guided by reputation, seniority, wisdom, or reforming zeal. But the office carries spiritual authority, economic control, political access, and symbolic prestige. Such things attract pressure. Noble families may favour one candidate, bishops may press another, kings may seek influence, internal factions may form quietly in corridors and chapter rooms. A monastery that preaches obedience may suffer from ambition. The contest need not be loud. A word spoken to a visitor, a letter sent through a trusted messenger, a memory of an old grievance, a rumour about a rival's severity, weakness, learning, health, or birth. Monks who have vowed humility can still calculate. Nuns enclosed from worldly marriage can still navigate family power. Human beings do not cease to be political because they wear religious clothing. Court intrigue can reach even the cloister. A wealthy abbey may serve as a royal ally, a diplomatic resting place, a treasury of documents, or a useful source of loans. A ruler may seek prayers, but also money, hospitality, counsel, and symbolic support. Nobles may want burial near a holy shrine because burial is not only devotion, but status arranged for eternity. A bishop may insist on visitation to correct faults, but also to assert jurisdiction. Power draws power toward itself. Prestige becomes a net. The monastery's reputation can protect it, yet also trap it. If it is famous for sanctity, scandal becomes more dangerous. If famous for learning, ignorance within its walls becomes embarrassing. If famous for poverty, wealth must be explained. If famous for royal favour, enemies gather among those who fear royal influence. The public image of holiness may become a fragile painted surface over more complicated wood. Inequality deepens the cracks. Within some houses, lay brothers perform hard agricultural labour, while choir monks devote more hours to liturgy and reading. In houses of women, noble status may shape leadership and opportunity. Even within vows, servants cook, haul, repair, and clean, but leave fewer traces in the written record. Tenants support the estate while rarely entering the spiritual memory of the institution, except as names attached to dues, disputes, or gifts. The monastery prays for all souls. Its records remember some more clearly than others. This imbalance is not accidental. Writing follows power. Tombs follow wealth. Painted donors appear kneeling in sacred scenes, while the hands that dug foundations remain unnamed. The hidden weakness of the monastic world is not only moral failure, it is selectivity. It remembers according to rank, usefulness, literacy, and proximity to authority. Many lives that sustain the holy house vanish almost completely. Economic strain can begin slowly. A bad harvest reduces rents. Disease kills livestock. War interrupts roads. A new roof costs more than expected. A lawsuit consumes money for years. A noble patron dies without a generous heir. Pilgrim offerings decline. A rival shrine gains attention. Inflation, debasement, or shifting trade patterns weaken old arrangements. The abbey still looks wealthy because stone remains, but its income may be less certain than its towers suggest. Debt enters like a shadow. At first, borrowing may seem practical. Repairs must be completed, guests must be fed, a royal demand must be answered, a court case must be pursued. But debt has memory too. It returns at inconvenient hours. Interest, obligation, and dependency can bind a monastery as tightly as any vow. The house that once received gifts may find itself bargaining with merchants, creditors, and officials who respect sanctity but count carefully. Spiritual fatigue is harder to measure. No account roll records it clearly. It appears in slower attendance, weaker singing, careless reading, quarrels over small privileges, resentment toward correction, and a dull acceptance of routines once felt as sacred. The bell rings, but not every heart rises with it. The words are sung, but the mind wanders. The rule is read, but its edges have been softened by habit. Still, fatigue is not final. Some individuals remain deeply devout in tired institutions. A quiet brother may pray with sincerity while officials dispute estates. A nun may copy a text with concentration while a house struggles with debt. A gardener may tend herbs with humility unknown to those who hold office. Hidden weakness does not erase hidden holiness. They often occupy the same corridors. This coexistence makes the monastery difficult to judge. It can shelter the poor and press hard on tenants. It can preserve books and alter documents. It can sing beautifully and quarrel bitterly. It can teach humility while defending privilege. It can offer peace to strangers while concealing wounds within its own walls. Its strength and fragility are woven together so closely that pulling one thread shakes the whole fabric. At dusk, the abbey still appears magnificent. The tower catches the last light. Smoke rises from kitchens. A steward returns with tired horses. In the church, candles are lit before polished vessels. In the archive, a charter lies open beside a sharpened knife and fresh ink. In the chapter house, an old grievance waits behind lowered eyes. In the guest hall, a noble visitor praises the peace of the place, unaware of the debts, rivalries, and whispered corrections beneath its calm. The bell rings again. It sounds clear. It sounds eternal. But beneath that confidence, the hidden cracks are already present, hairline fractures in stone, memory, discipline, and trust. They do not bring the walls down at once. They wait. They widen with pressure. They teach that no human institution, however sacred its purpose, can rise above time without carrying time's burden inside it. Pressure comes first from the edges. A monastery may look inward, toward altar, cloister, rule, and memory. But beyond its fields the world is changing. Roads carry more than pilgrims. Rivers carry more than grain. Rumours arrive with traders and frightened peasants, telling of ships on the coast, armed bands in the forest, rival lords in dispute, taxes rising, harvests failing, and kings looking toward church lands with measuring eyes. The walls seem strong, but walls cannot stop history. One danger comes with fire. Along coasts and rivers, raiders learn where wealth rests behind stone and prayer. A monastery is not a fortress in the deepest sense, even when it has gates and thick doors. It holds silver vessels, books, cloth, food stores, livestock, and captives worth taking. Its people are trained for chant, not battle. Its bell can warn, but it cannot hold a sword. Imagine the first glimpse of sails. A watcher on a headland sees dark shapes moving through morning mist. At first, they might be fishing boats. Then the number seems wrong, the speed seems wrong, the line of oars flashes, someone runs toward the abbey, breathless, slipping on wet grass. Inside, the community must decide what can be carried and what must be abandoned. Relics, perhaps, a gospel book, a chest of charters. The old and sick cannot move quickly. Fear enters the cloister without asking permission. If the raiders come, sacredness may not protect the house. Doors splinter, smoke fills the church, men shout in a language the monks may not know. A jewelled shrine is stripped, a library catches fire. Animals scream in the yard. The dead are left among overturned benches and broken vessels. Later, survivors return and find ash where memory had stood. Yet violence does not always destroy a monastery forever. Sometimes it hardens it. After raids, communities rebuild, move inland, seek stronger patrons, enclose treasures more carefully, and record loss as part of identity. A burned abbey can become more famous in memory than it was in peace. Martyrdom, survival, and restoration become new sources of authority. Still, something has changed. The cloister has learned that holiness can be violated, and that the outside world is never as distant as the rule wishes. Other threats arrive not with axes, but with sermons. Reformers look at comfortable houses and ask painful questions. Why do monks own so much land? Why are feasts so rich? Why do abbots ride like nobles? Why are offices influenced by families? Why is silence full of legal argument? Reform can begin as grief. It can also become accusation. The old houses hear voices calling them back to poverty, stricter enclosure, simpler food, cleaner elections, and sharper discipline. Reform is a kind of invasion from within the faith itself. It does not reject the monastery. It asks whether the monastery has forgotten its soul. New movements rise with force because they speak to old unease. Some seek remote valleys and plain architecture. Some simplify ritual. Some emphasize poverty, preaching, study, manual labour, or direct service among townspeople. Monks who live within ancient privileges may feel judged by younger fires of devotion. The question is no longer whether the cloister is holy, but whether it is holy enough. Kings and princes bring another pressure. They may present themselves as protectors, but protection has a price. A ruler who defends an abbey may expect loyalty, loans, hospitality, political support, or influence over appointments. During war, monastic wealth can appear less like sacred trust and more like usable resource. A king with soldiers to pay may look at chalices, lands, rents, and treasuries with practical attention. Piety does not always restrain hunger for revenue. Royal officers arrive with documents. They ask for inventories, contributions, subsidies, rights, confirmations, and oaths. They may speak respectfully while calculating value. The abbot must answer carefully. Refusal can bring anger, compliance can drain the house. The monastery stands between conscience and survival, between sacred exemption and political reality. Its hidden rooms are no longer hidden enough. Peasants, too, can become a storm. For generations, villagers may have paid dues, performed labour, used abbey mills, grazed animals under rules, and watched monastic barns fill while their own stores trembled after poor harvests. In stable times, resentment may remain quiet, folded into custom, but famine, war taxation, plague, or harsh officials can turn old obligations into open anger. Holy landlords are still landlords. When revolt comes, it may not distinguish between prayer and property. Angry men break fences, seize grain, burn records, attack manor houses, or demand freedom from burdens inherited across generations. The archive becomes dangerous because it remembers what rebels want forgotten. a charter proving rent, service, or boundary can be as hated as a weapon. In such moments, the written past itself becomes an enemy. Climate adds its own pressure, indifferent to vows. Too much rain rots grain. Drought withers pasture. Late frost ruins vines. Livestock disease thins herds. Floods tear away bridges and mills. A monastery with careful accounts and good barns may endure one bad year, but repeated failures weaken everything. Charity grows harder. Tenants fall behind. Prices rise. Hunger brings theft, illness, and desperation to the gate. The bell still rings, but the stomach does not listen to bells forever. Disease reshapes communities in ways no rule can fully command. Epidemics move along roads and through guest houses. They enter dormitories, kitchens, infirmaries, and villages tied to monastic estates. A community can lose elders, scribes, singers, officers, servants, tenants, and patrons in a single season of terror. The offices continue, but with fewer voices. Fields may go untilled. Buildings decay because hands are gone. Plague also changes the living. Those who survive inherit questions. Why did the devout die beside the careless? Why did prayers fail to stop the carts of bodies? Why does a house once full of disciplined sound now echo in half-empty rooms? Some respond with deeper faith, others with fear, numbness, or suspicion. The monastery remains, but its emotional weather has shifted. Trade disruption weakens distant ties. If roads become unsafe, guests decrease, markets falter, rents and coin become harder to collect, and supplies once taken for granted become rare. Salt, wax, parchment, spices, metals, and fine cloth may grow costly. A house famous for hospitality may reduce what it offers. A scriptorium may slow for lack of materials. A shrine may receive fewer pilgrims. Influence contracts when movement contracts. At the same time, towns are growing restless with new forms of religious life. Friars walk where monks remain enclosed. They preach in marketplaces, hear confessions in crowded streets, teach in schools, and live closer to urban poverty. Their presence does not erase monasteries, but it changes expectations. People begin to imagine holiness not only behind walls but on roads, in universities, among merchants, beggars, and artisans. The cloister no longer holds the spiritual imagination alone. Ideas move faster than walls can answer. Debates about wealth, scripture, authority, images, relics, indulgences, confession, and corruption spread through sermons, schools, letters, and eventually printed pages. Some critiques are careful, others are furious. The monastery becomes a symbol for different people in different ways. To one, it is prayer and learning. To another, privilege and decay. To another, shelter. To another, theft clothed as holiness. External threats and internal resistance begin to feed each other. A ruler attacks monastic privilege and finds popular resentment useful. A reformer denounces luxury and gives language to old frustrations. A village resists dues and points to spiritual ideals the monks themselves proclaim. A bishop demands correction and cites scandal. A noble family seeks control and presents interference as protection. Every pressure finds a moral argument. This is how worlds weaken, not through one blow alone, through many hands pulling different threads. Still, the monastery does not simply collapse under pressure. It adapts where it can. It strengthens gates. It reforms customs. It negotiates taxes. It sells land. It reduces numbers. It copies old privileges into new legal forms. It seeks patrons. It turns famous relics into renewed pilgrimage. It educates. It litigates. It prays more intensely, or more mechanically, depending on the people within. Some houses shine in hardship. A small community may care for the sick during epidemic. An abbess may defend her lands with remarkable skill. A monk may write a chronicle that captures the trembling of an age. A poor priory may maintain hospitality when richer houses refuse. Danger can expose weakness, but it can also reveal courage that peace kept hidden. Night falls on a troubled landscape, on the coast. Waves strike the dark rocks where watchers once feared sails. In the countryside, peasants gather around low fires and speak of rents, weather, and war. In a town, a preacher's voice carries beneath timbered roofs. In a royal office, clerks calculate church wealth by candlelight. In the monastery, a few tired voices chant while rain taps against the glass. The cloister remains enclosed, but the age is pressing at every side. The end does not always announce itself as an end. Sometimes it arrives with officials, clerks, seals, and investories. A gate opens to men who do not come as pilgrims. They carry authority from beyond the cloister, written in firm legal language, and they ask to see the plate, the vestments, the books, the bells, the relics, the accounts, the leases, the beds, the kitchenware, the livestock, and the keys. The monastery is measured room by room, not as a sacred world, but as property. A chalice becomes weight of silver, a bell becomes metal, a field becomes revenue. The transformation is quiet and terrible. In some places, the community has grown thin long before the official moment. The dormitory holds fewer sleepers. The choir sounds weaker. The roofs need repair. The old confidence has faded into routine, debt, or caution. The end, when it comes, may feel less like a thunderclap than the final closing of a door already warped by years of weather. In other houses, shock is real. Men and women who expected to die under vows must leave the pattern that formed them. Some receive pensions. Some find places in other religious settings. Some return awkwardly to families that no longer know what to do with them. Some obey outwardly while inwardly mourning the collapse of a life arranged by bells, prayer, hierarchy, and enclosure. The world outside may call it reform, necessity, justice, or liberation. For those inside, it can feel like exile. The church is emptied. Relics are removed, broken, tested, hidden, mocked, sold, or lost. Shrines that drew generations of hands and knees are stripped of jewels. Candles no longer burn before familiar saints. The painted faces on walls may be whitewashed. Tombs are opened or neglected. The bones of founders, abbots, abbesses, patrons, and forgotten brothers lie beneath floors where no chant now rises. The silence changes character. It is no longer chosen. It is abandoned. Books scatter in different ways. Some enter royal libraries, cathedral collections, schools, private hands, or later museums. Some are valued for their texts. Others are cut apart for bindings, covers, wrappers, scrap, or practical reuse. A page that once carried a sermon may line a box. A fragment of music may stiffen the spine of another book. A legal roll may survive because someone needed old parchment more than old memory. This is one of history's strangest mercies. Destruction can accidentally preserve. A manuscript leaf hidden inside a binding may sleep for centuries, protected by neglect. A charter reused for a cover may carry a name that would otherwise vanish. A broken wall may reveal painted colour under later plaster. An old drain may keep the shape of vanished buildings. Archaeology often begins where reverence has ended. Listening to rubbish, foundations, stains in soil, animal bones, seed remains, fragments of glass, buckles, tiles, and the quiet testimony of things thrown away. The buildings find new uses. A cloister walk becomes a source of stone for village houses. A chapter house becomes a barn. A refectory shelters cattle. A guest house turns into a manor. A church nave is roofless, then grassy, then picturesque. Children play where processions once turned. Ivy grows over carved saints. Owls nest in towers. Rain falls through empty windows onto floors where generations once knelt. Time softens violence. It also conceals it. A ruin seen at sunset can look peaceful, almost gentle. The broken arches frame sky. The grass is bright in summer. Visitors walk slowly, speaking in low voices, feeling beauty without always sensing loss. Yet each fallen stone marks interrupted labour. Each empty window marks a vanished sound. Each missing roof marks a moment when protection failed, or money failed, or belief changed, or power decided that a sacred house had become useful in another form. Not all monasteries vanish. Some survive through adaptation, reform, continuity, or restoration. Some communities endure in altered forms. Some churches remain parish churches, their monastic past folded into local worship. Some foundations are refilled in later centuries by new orders. Some are remembered through archives alone. The monastic world does not disappear evenly. It withdraws, breaks, transforms, and returns in fragments. Legacy is rarely tidy. The monasteries left wounds as well as wonders. They could hold wealth while neighbours struggled. They could defend privilege with spiritual language. They could exclude, discipline, conceal, and forget. Their records often preserve the voices of rulers and officials more clearly than servants, tenants, women of low status, labourers, or the poor at the gate. To remember them honestly is not to polish every stone until it shines, but neither should they be reduced to hypocrisy. They fed strangers. They taught children. They healed the sick as best they could. They guarded fragile books through centuries of danger. They shaped music, architecture, agriculture, law, memory, and ideas of disciplined time. They offered a form of life in which the day itself became meaningful, where eating, waking, working, reading, silence, and death were bound into a pattern larger than personal desire. Their secrets were many. Some were locked in chests. Some were written in difficult hands. Some were hidden beneath floors, in reliquaries, in forged documents, in corrected margins, in private griefs, in forbidden attachments, in quiet acts of mercy no chronicle recorded. Some secrets were not dark at all. They were simply subtle, the secrets of patience, repetition, attention, and endurance. A monastery taught that time could be shaped. That may be its most lasting mystery. The medieval day was divided by bells, not by machines. The year was organized by fasting, feasting, sowing, harvesting, remembering, and waiting. The dead remained present through prayer. The future was imagined through judgment and paradise. The past lived in books and tombs. Within such a world, time was not empty space to be filled. It was sacred material to be handled carefully. Even now, the ruins still alter time. A visitor steps through a broken doorway and instinctively slows. The modern noise recedes for a moment. Footsteps soften on grass. The eye follows the line of a vanished roof. A bird calls from the arch where a window once held coloured glass. Wind moves through the cloister garth. The mind begins to imagine bells, sandals, chant, smoke, bread, ink, cold mornings, whispered corrections, tired hands, and the long patience of stone. Nothing fully returns. Yet something remains. The old monasteries linger in libraries where their books are studied, in landscapes shaped by their fields and fish ponds, in village names, in surviving chants, in medicinal gardens, in fragments of painted plaster, in carved stones set into later walls, in legal boundaries whose origins are nearly forgotten. They linger wherever people still ask why silence can feel powerful, why ruins can feel inhabited, and why a life of withdrawal could leave such deep marks on the world. At evening, imagine the last bell. Not the bell of one monastery only, but the bell of an age, sounding across mist, roofs, orchards, rivers, and graves. Its note travels for a while, then thins in the air. The fields darken, the road empties. A final lamp burns behind a small window, then is covered. The cloister settles into shadow. Stone cools. Leaves gather. Rain begins softly. History does not vanish when power disappears. It changes form. It becomes memory, ruin, rumour, parchment, foundation, song, and silence. The hidden world of medieval monasteries is still there, not living as it once lived, but waiting in traces, asking us to listen carefully to what quiet places keep. And in that quiet, long after the last office is sung, the old stones seem almost to breathe,